All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is number 17. And today, we are going to talk about something very disturbing. This is something that should not have happened, but has. And I want something good to come about this. And, yeah. So we're going to be talking about After Midnight. For those of you that don't know, years ago, in the before times, I'm actually going to look this up. Because I want to see when it actually happened. Yeah, okay, so years ago in the before times, there was a show called At Midnight. It's hosted by Chris Hardwick in an attempt to convince people that Chris Hardwick was funny. It did not succeed. No. It was an American take on a type of show that is extremely popular in the UK called panel shows. And panel shows are basically, what they do is they get a bunch of comedians on, and then the comedians just riff with each other for like 30 minutes. And then they take most of the good jokes and the jokes that aren't so offensive that they can't be shown on television, and they cut them into a show. And I love panel shows. I really, really do. I think they are really, really funny, and I think they're a great vehicle to kind of to show off comics that are really, really good at kind of improvisation and off the cuff being funny, which is not something that every comedian can do. There are a lot of comedians that are brilliant writers, but are not really good on their feet. And in a panel show style format, you need to be quick on your feet, and you also need to understand kind of how to interact with people, which is another thing that not all comics are great at. And you also have to kind of understand how to structure a panel show, because one of the hallmarks of panel shows, and the panel show that most Americans are most used to, is Whose Line Is It Anyway? Whose Line Is It Anyway is a panel show, and it does what most panel shows do. It actually is a show that started in the UK. It actually started as a radio show, and then they made it a television show in the 90s. I think in the late 80s, early 90s. And then we made an American version that was hosted by Drew Carey that went on for like 7 or 8 seasons, or it might have even gone for 9. But the reason it went on so long is it was ungodly cheap to make, and people enjoyed it. But the hallmarks of a panel show is, again, you create this situation where there's this pseudo game show aspect to it, and they give out points in some way, and at the end a winner is crowned, generally for a completely arbitrary reason. And that's kind of the joke. They make a big joke about it on Whose Line Is It Anyway, where in the beginning of all of Drew Carey's episodes, and I think quite a few of it got a what do you call it, they brought it back, and now they have, I can't remember her name now. They have a new host, and she's great, but she's not Drew Carey. But the joke was always like, hey, welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway, the show where the points don't matter. Yep, the points are kind of like the refs in a NFL football game. They don't really matter until they do. And that was a really, really bad joke that I just came up with off the top of my head, and that's not how it works. And it was real bad. So, That's one of the aspects of the panel show format is the idea that yes, there are points, but they're completely arbitrary and made up, and everybody kind of agrees that the entire purpose of the show is to just be funny, and the person that wins is generally the person that it's going to be most funny that they win. If you look at shows like Mock the Week, I think Dara O'Brien, who is the host of that for years, and now it's over, I think he actually did try to give points, but he never like explained what the points were or anything like that. And generally, the person that won was the team that won was generally the funniest one. But again, the entire point of the points in the game show format is, well, we can't just bring people on and have them crack jokes about nonsense. Like, no one would watch that, but everybody watches game shows. So the entire point of the game show aspect is the joke. It's not a real game show. They're not really winning anything. And one of my favorite current panel shows is a show called 8 out of 10 Cats. I'm going to try this one more time. 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown. And the reason that I love it is Countdown is an actual game show that makes no sense, and it has been on for decades in the UK. The way that Countdown works is there are 2 different rounds, and you have 2 people competing against each other in these rounds. The first round is the letters round, and the letters round is basically the contestants will ask this woman named Rachel Riley, who is not only absolutely gorgeous, but she's really funny, and she is a maths genius. And so what they do is they ask Rachel Riley to put up either a letter or a consonant, and they go until I think they have 9 up there. And so she basically has these 2 stacks of cards, where one stack is just random letters, and one stack is random vowels. Or random consonants, and the other one's random vowels. And they'll just go, can I have a consonant, a vowel, a consonant, a vowel, and they put them up on this board in the order that they're pulled. And then the 2 contestants have, I think it's 30 seconds, to come up with the longest word that they can come up with using those letters. And then whoever gets the longest gets points based on how long the word was that they made. Then the next round is the numbers round. And basically what it is again, they ask Rachel for numbers, but they can choose high numbers or low numbers. High numbers are like, I think they're 25, 50, 75, and 100. And low numbers are single-digit numbers. And so they do, I can't remember how much they get, but they do a bunch of numbers, and then she hits a button and a random total will come up. And they have to come up with a way using multiplication, divisions, addition, and subtraction to come up with that number. And so they get 30 seconds to come up with an equation that does that, and then whoever either gets it exactly or gets closest to it gets some points. And they do that for a number of rounds until someone is eventually crowned the champion. It is the most bizarre game show ever, and it is remarkably entertaining to watch. So 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown. There's a panel show called 8 out of 10 Cats. And what it is they get a bunch of kind of survey results, and then they ask the panelists questions about them. That's where the 8 out of 10 Cats comes from. It's like, 9 out of 10 dentists recommend this. They'll get a bunch of trivia, basically, that is based around a survey sample style thing. And then comedians just make random jokes about it. And it's a funny show, don't get me wrong. But 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown is where they take the host of 8 out of 10 Cats, which is Jimmy Carr, and he goes into the host seat for Countdown, and then they bring comedians on to do it. Well, the whole point of Countdown is you have to be pretty good at math in general and kind of non-linear thinking, so that you can look at these random numbers and find ways to multiply and divide and add and subtract them together to come up with a random number. And then you also have to be pretty good at kind of anagrams and word scrambles and stuff like that. Neither of those two things are particularly high up on a comedian's like list of things that they excel at. And so the entire point of 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown is, yes, they actually play Countdown. They do it really, really poorly. And they'll have special guests that just do nonsense stuff. And while they're having their 30 seconds to figure out what they're doing, a lot of times Jimmy Carr and Rachel Riley will come up and perform like a really fast little comedy sketch or something like that. Like it's really funny. And the award at the end is generally something completely nonsense. And so again, they're using an actual game show format, and they're just poking fun at the fact that we actually don't care who wins. The entire purpose of this is to be funny. So let's go back to After Midnight. After Midnight is Taylor Tomlinson's new late night show. It is a revival of At Midnight, which was a Comedy Central show. And the thing with At Midnight was it was basically based around Twitter and YouTube, where they would react to clips and then try to make jokes off the cuff about it. And if they did well, they would get points. And if they didn't, they just wouldn't show up on the airing. So After Midnight is the revival of it. It's hosted by Taylor Tomlinson. Taylor Tomlinson is one of my favorite comedians. She is so incredibly funny. Her writing is phenomenal, but she also posts clips of her crowd work, which if you're unfamiliar with what crowd work is. When you're a stand-up comedian, there's kind of like two different things that you can do, and most stand-up comedians dabble in both, but there are certain ones that are better at one at the other. And so you have what's called material, which is stuff that you actually write, and you workshop it, and you put a lot of work into creating these jokes that just land really well. That's material. Then you have what's called crowd work, and crowd work is literally just talking to the crowd and kind of poking fun at what's going on. Some comedians that do crowd work kind of attack the crowd. Some people that do crowd work kind of bring up the crowd and kind of make them feel good about themselves. Normally people are a little bit mixed. And then the other kind of quote-unquote crowd work, which isn't really crowd work, is when you get hecklers. Most comedians have a way to shut up a heckler really, really quickly, using heckler put-downs and things like that. So that's kind of a subgenre of crowd work that is, I guess we could call it unintentional crowd work. Because comedians don't want to be heckled, but crowd work in and of itself can be really funny. Dara O'Brien is brilliant with crowd work. Currently, Matt Rife, who everybody is super mad at because he made some jokes that people didn't like, he's actually generally pretty good with crowd work. I don't think I've ever seen any of his actual material, but his crowd work is generally pretty good. And Taylor Tomlinson, as I mentioned before, her material is great, but she's also really good at crowd work. And there's been some really amazing crowd work stuff that she's done. She puts up on her YouTube channel. Like one, she's just like talking to random people in the crowd, and she finds out that this dude in the audience dated twins. And she's like, really? At like the same time? And it keeps going, and it turns into this weird thing where this dude, apparently the woman he's married to has an identical twin. And he dated her sister first for about a year. And then they broke up, and then eventually he got with her sister, and they got married. And they've been happily married for like 10 or 20 years at this point. But it was just this really amazing thing where Taylor's just like, what? And she sits down on stage. She had a stool there. She sits down on the stool. She's like, we've got to talk about this. And so it's really, really funny. So when you're talking about something like At Midnight or now After Midnight, the thing that's going to make it funny is you have to have people that are very quick on their feet. They have to understand how to kind of deal with it's effectively like a version of crowd work. And you also need to have an editor effectively that makes sense of everything, because shows like this can get very, very chaotic because of the kind of popcorn nature of it. And After Midnight, saw the first episode, is up on YouTube, was not good in any way, shape, or form. Now, part of that is it was the very first episode. Taylor has never done anything like this. And it seems like neither has the crew, because At Midnight was Comedy Central, and this is on, I think it's CBS. So nobody really knew what they were doing, and it showed. And it showed really, really bad. Now, part of it was At Midnight, the original version on Comedy Central with Chris Hardwick. At Midnight was not a phenomenal show, but it worked and it was cheap. And eventually they got to the point where they started understanding what kind of guests to bring on. They didn't exclusively bring on stand-up comics. They had, like, Will Wheaton was regularly on there, mostly because he used to be, I don't know if he still is, but he used to be really good friends, like best friends with Chris Hardwick, because they actually used to live together when they were both starving artists. And so they've known each other, excuse me, they've known each other for years. And Will Wheaton is remarkably good on his feet when he's not being a pompous ass. So he actually worked pretty well. And At Midnight kind of got into a groove a bit. It was never a phenomenally good show, but as far as American panel shows, it was probably the second best panel show on American TV other than Whose Line. Now, unfortunately, there were only 2 panel shows on American TV, so coming in second place of 2 is not a particularly great thing. But it did last for like 4 years. So, and again, a lot of the reason why shows like that last for so long is they're insanely cheap to make. But it wasn't a bad show, it just wasn't a phenomenal show, and it didn't quite understand how panel shows work, which is very true of most Americanized versions of UK properties. Comedy in the UK is just a very different situation. One of my favorite kind of explanations of American comedy versus UK comedy is in a comedy sketch. You would see a man, trying to do something, and then a person comes in and dumps a pail of water on him. In American comedy, the comic would want to be the person dumping the water and trying to ham it up in that. In UK comedy, the comic would want to be the person that's getting the water dumped on them. UK comedy is very self-deprecating, and it's all about kind of being the odd man out and being awkward and misunderstood and things like that. Whereas American comedy is basically being the smartest person in the room, being very, very quick, kind of eviscerating anyone that you don't like with wit and charm and things like that. And it's just not very good for panel shows, because panel shows in and of themselves are very collaborative. And when you have a bunch of people all trying to be the smartest person in the room, it turns into kind of a pissing contest, which is basically what happened on the first episode of After Midnight. They had Whitney Cumming and 2 people that I don't remember who they are because they were that memorable. And I'm actually going to look up who they are, because the person that won was just so god-awful bad. But because of the format that they decided upon, it... Really? You're not even going to let me go to my YouTube? That's cool. YouTube is doing new things where it doesn't like ad blockers. And for some odd reason, I can't access YouTube despite the fact that I don't use an ad blocker on YouTube, because I prefer the people that I like to make money. YouTube has decided that I don't get to go to YouTube right now, which is stupid. I'm wondering if it's just my internet. It's possible it's just my internet. But I'm going to go to it on my phone because I need to figure out what these people's names are. No, internet's working on my phone. let's do this, and I'm going to instantly pause it because I don't. Oh, I bet you I can just mute my phone. That would make sense. For the love of all that is holy, just let me see this. Ah. I think it is my internet. Every so often my internet will just decide, you know what? You don't really need to be able to see anything on the internet. Okay, so Whitney Cummings, Kurt, oh, I'm going to ruin your name, Kurt Bronler, and Aparna, I'm going to ruin your name too, and I'm really sorry about this, Nancherla, I think, Nancherla. So yeah, they had 3 contestants, then they had Taylor Tomlinson, who's amazing and wonderful, and now you're working. Seriously. So, they had these 3 guests. None of the guests were particularly funny. And this was the first problem that the show had, which I believe is a holdover from At Midnight. The way they have it set up is that Taylor's at her own podium. There's this big old screen where they show the tweets and videos that they're going to be reacting to on. And then they have the 3 panelists. Each panelist has their own podium and has a buzzer on it and has a little screen to show how many points that they have. Don't show the points. First things first, again, the points don't matter. And they do make a joke about the points not mattering, except for the fact that they do matter because the points are what not only lets you win, but it's also what they use to kick off one of the panelists near the end. So the points do matter. They just decide that they don't matter until they do matter. So that's the first thing. Second thing, not all the jokes are going to make it to air. Some of the jokes just don't land, and so they'll cut those out. Some of the jokes are not appropriate even after midnight. When all the kiddies are asleep, there's still things that you can't say on TV. Not if you want to have advertisers. And so those jokes are going to be cut as well. However, Taylor was still giving points. And the way that Taylor gives points is she has a button on her panel that lets her, that she just hits and it makes a sound and they get points. I would assume she has 3 different buttons so she can give points to any person. And points are given out in 100-point increments, which is another kind of dumb thing. Because there's, why 100? Why not 10? Why not 1? It's just like, well, we like big numbers, so what happens is when they're editing together the episode, you will see points randomly change. And you will, by the end of the episode, you probably didn't see about 1/4 to half of the points get awarded. But they still showed up on the screens because they're keeping track of the points. And there's a live studio audience there. And so the studio audience would kind of feel weird if because they don't know what's going to make it to air or not when they're doing it. And so what ends up happening is you'll sit there as like, oh, they're neck and neck. And this person's in the lead. And now this person's in the lead. And it will just instantly change. It's like, wait a minute, wasn't he in the lead and now she's in the... How did that happen? You need to get rid of keeping track of the points. If the points really don't matter, then don't track them. And again, I believe this is a holdover from At Midnight because At Midnight they gave out points too. And I've actually used the line that they used to use. Chris Hardwick would just go, points! And I really like that. Again, I'm not a fan of Chris Hardwick. I think he's... for lack of a better term, I think he's a douchebag. And there have been accusations that have both been proven and not proven and unproven and disproven, and nobody actually knows. But I know one person in particular that has met the dude and flat out will not work with him in Hollywood. Refuses to do anything with him, and I kind of trust this particular person's read of Hardwick to the point where I get kind of a bad feeling from him as well. So anyway, Chris Hardwick, lots of people love him. I'm not one of them. Let's put it that way. So Chris Hardwick used to go points, and then they get points, and I think they used to track him on At Midnight too. Again, it's been At Midnight ended in 2017. So we're talking about, what is that? 7 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. So we're talking, I mean, this is the before times. Nobody remembers the before times. So at midnight, we keep track of the points. And I think they had a similar problem where points would just magically appear. And it's jarring for the audience. Either show the whole thing, which if you do that, you're not going to be on network television. You're going to be on YouTube somewhere. Or don't show the points. It's that easy, because I think the show is better when it is edited. Because not only can you edit it so that, you know, the jokes that didn't land are cut out and stuff that you really can't show or cut out, but you can also reorder answers if they're funnier in a particular order, or anything like that. Like you can edit it so that it makes a more interesting show. And so I think all of those are really, really good, but you can't do that when the numbers just magically change. So that's the first thing that After Midnight needs to do, is get rid of the numbers. The numbers don't matter. The points don't matter. You said it in the beginning. The reward for this episode was Taylor Tomlinson's father's approval. So they admit that the whole thing is a farce. There's no purpose to doing any of it. And so why are you fixating so much on this point structure that doesn't matter? No other panel show keeps track of the points, or at least keeps track of them publicly. Again, I believe on what was it called? Now I've completely Mock the Week. There we go. I believe on Mock the Week, Dara O'Brien actually kept notes about who was winning and stuff like that, but they never showed it to the audience. And they do that on purpose. If you're going to re-edit things, you can't leave something that blatantly shows, hey, by the way, you missed some of this. We all know we're not seeing the whole show. Like, we can all accept that, but we don't need this constant reminder. So that's the first thing that After Midnight needs to do to actually become a good show. The second thing is they need to reduce the number of games, quote unquote, that they're playing to allow for more interaction and banter between the guests. That's the thing that makes panel shows really interesting, is the guests get to play off each other. And what they're doing right now is the show is so hyper structured, and they have to fit so much into such a little time that there's no chance for the guests to actually banter with each other, which is the funniest part. Comedians in general are funny when you get them together and just let them riff. The Blue Collar Comedy Tour did this thing in, I believe, most of the movies, and I believe they did this on the actual tour as well, where they would bring all 4 comedians out and they would just kind of shoot the shit in front of an audience. And sometimes it was a little bit more structured, like they'd go, okay, well, everyone say, you know, your favorite joke that you find funny, or you know, they had one where the kind of MC for that particular leg of the tour came out and just asked them questions, like a Q&A style thing. Another one where Larry the Cable Guy just brought out a guitar and would go, I believe, and then they would say something nonsense. So you can have structure, but the funniest thing is going to be the comics interacting with each other. And because of the breakneck speed that After Midnight is doing right now, the comics have no time to interact with each other. They barely have enough time to come up with their jokes, which the majority of them were not jokes. They didn't even count as one-liners. They were just really bad references to various things going on. And it was obvious that none of these people, aside from maybe Whitney Cummings, because she was, in my opinion, she was probably the most solid. However, she was also the only one that got kicked off, which really, really upset me, because the other 2 comedians were just not funny. And they looked petrified the entire time that they were there, whereas Whitney Cummings was relatively funny and was actively trying to interact with other people. And it made the whole thing better. But they simply just weren't rewarding her for like interacting with other people. There's a specific instance where one of the people that I'm so bad with names. Do I still have it up there? Kurt. Kurt actually made his joke, and it wasn't a great joke, but it was okay. And then Whitney Cummings just kind of chimed in, and it made everything funnier. It was really, really good. And then they accidentally awarded Whitney some points for that. And they're like, wait, this is Kurt's joke. Only Kurt's supposed to get points. And so they gave him extra points because they accidentally gave Whitney Cummings points. And that was the stupidest thing ever. Again, the points don't matter. The games don't matter. The whole point of this is to just tell jokes and to highlight new comics. Like, that's the entire purpose of a show like this. And that's the entire reason they exist in the UK is comedians will go on these panel shows to kind of showcase their particular style of comedy. And then they will be able to go on tour and do stand-up shows and stuff like that. And people go, oh, I saw you on Mock the Week. I'm totally going to go see this comic. That's the entire purpose of panel shows, it's marketing for comedians. And this show seems to just, After Midnight just seems to completely misunderstand, and they think that they're playing a real game show. It's not a real game show. It's not the point of it. And so there's no time for banter, and it makes it a very boring, awkward show. And again, that's what At Midnight did. And I think they did a little bit better because of the next point, which is you need to ensure that the comics that you're bringing on understand improvisation. Because that's the whole point of this. And again, not all comics are really fast. There are a lot of really, really talented comics that are phenomenally good writers. But when you put them in a situation where they haven't had time to go through and write everything down, it turns very awkward, and they just get put in a bad position. And that's not a bad thing. A lot of comics like that can become like show writers and stuff like that for actual comedies. Or comedians that are really, really good at writing can transition that into becoming sitcom stars. Like Ray Romano is a brilliant writer. I have no idea how good he is off the cuff, but he's an absolutely brilliant writer, and that's why Everybody Loves Raymond lasted so long. The same thing is true about Jerry Seinfeld. He's a really, really brilliant writer. As far as how good he is off the cuff, I'm actually not 100% certain. I've seen situations where he's been doing interviews and stuff like that, and things have happened that he wasn't particularly fond of, and he just comes off as being a condescending asshole. And to me, that would point to he's really not great in the hot seat. Because I've seen other comedians that are really, really good that get kind of put in bad situations, and they kind of joke their way out of it, and they can still make themselves look good without having to turn into a complete asshole. If you look at things like Ryan Reynolds is not a comedian. Ryan Reynolds is an actor, but he is really, really good on his feet. And so he, there's been quite a few different situations where people have tried to kind of gotcha him, or they've tried to kind of paint him in a bad light, and he just jokes his way out of it. That is a kind of person that should be on At Midnight. Now, Ryan Reynolds probably will never be on After Midnight, I guess. Will probably never be on After Midnight because there's no purpose for him going on there. He's not an up-and-coming comedian. He is a multi-million-dollar actor that most of the stuff that he does super, super well. So there's absolutely no incentive for him to go on After Midnight unless he likes the show format, which at this particular point isn't a good format. So yeah, they need to change who they're bringing on. Like I said, I think Whitney Cummings was probably the best person that they had on there, and her particular style of comedy and interaction and stuff like that was punished. Like, they actively stopped her from being funny because it didn't fit with the format that they had created, which was just a bad format. I'm not saying that reacting to tweets and making like little one-liner jokes is bad. I'm saying that they put so much into it, and they tried to shove so many. I think in the first episode they had like 6 or 7 different games. Don't quote me on that. I didn't count. I'm just going off of my really, really bad memory. But they had like 6 or 7 different games, and in each game they would have anywhere between 3 to like 6 different things that they had to react to. And on the actual airing, every single person got a chance to do it. So basically, in a 23, 21 minute long episode, which actually I can look to see exactly how long it was, because I can look. The reason I said, it's 39. So this is actually an hour long. This is actually an hour long show, which is even more interesting. So maybe they had more. But anyway, if anyone is not aware, an hour long TV show is actually only around about 43 minutes, or at least that's what it used to be. I think it's gone a little bit more, because about a third of the runtime nowadays of any TV show is commercials. It used to be slightly less than that. Like, again, a half an hour TV show used to be 23 minutes, and then it went down to 21 minutes. And I think now they're around 20 minutes. Same thing is true of about hour longs. It used to be about 47 minutes was an hour long, and then it went down to like 43, and now it's down to around 40, because they need more ads to be able to pay for everything. So anyway, they were so breakneck, and they were trying to do so much that they never gave the comedians any time to do anything other than, here's my one-liner. And none of these comedians were particularly great at one-liners. One-liners are a style of comedy. They can be very, very effective, but not a lot of modern comics do a lot of one-line comedy, because essentially it's kind of viewed as low-hanging fruit. And the same thing is true about puns, which is another thing that they tried to do a lot of on there, and none of these comics were particularly adept at making puns. Again, I love puns. Puns are one of my favorite things in the world. I will go out of my way to make really bad puns. But puns are considered dad jokes. They're considered low-hanging fruit, and so modern comics, at least modern American comics, will go, oh no, I would never do puns. No, I am a comedian. I tell stories that are humorous in nature. So you have a bunch of people that are very much out of their element. You are forcing them to do things that they're not good at, and then you're not giving them enough time to do the things that they are good at, and you're actively punishing the things that are most entertaining, which is the banter. And so, as of right now, After Midnight is a fucking train wreck. And it's really sad, because again, Taylor Tomlinson is brilliant, and she does her best trying to be funny in this format, and it just doesn't work. Taylor Tomlinson is brilliant at one-liners and stuff. Like, her comedy is really, really good at just putting, like, she'll present a situation, and then she'll do a one-liner about it, and then another one, and then another one, and just kind of keeps trailing off with these one-liners. Like, one of my favorite jokes, because it just really kind of exemplifies her comedy style, is she's talking about how she got engaged, but then the engagement fell through. And she goes, yeah, and it was weird. It was weird wearing a ring, because it kept getting caught on things like my hair, my clothes, my freedom. And that's the one-liner, is my freedom. And she knows how to deliver it much better than I did. And she would do this little kind of pause there, and that's kind of her comedic style, is she will explain, like, she'll present a situation and then just say something really random and off the wall and connect it to it, and it's always really funny. So I think Taylor Tomlinson should be able to thrive in this. But again, it was her first episode. She's very, very green in this particular format. And it feels like she was a little bit limited, especially since it's obvious the jokes that she didn't write. Because, again, she's a very talented writer, and she has these kind of pre-canned jokes that she's using, which is true about every single panel show. The host generally will have a few kind of pre-written jokes that they will do as part of an introduction to the various segments, and then everything else is just improvisation and interaction and stuff like that. So it's perfectly fine that she has jokes that she's written, but you could tell the ones that she wrote, or at least the ones that were written for her, well, because she would kind of get into her persona and they would come off really well. And then you would see her kind of mumbling through these really, really poorly written jokes. And or not mumbling, she says them perfectly well, but they just don't land. They don't feel like her. Obviously, whoever wrote that joke for her does not understand her comedy style, nor does it understand her kind of physicality when she tells jokes, and it just, nothing about it worked. And again, she had to go at this absolute breakneck speed, and she had to keep giving out these points and things like that. And she's doing everything she can to kind of explain away, not really explain away, more like hang a lantern on. It's a term from television. Basically, if there's something that just seems completely implausible in a television show, you can do a thing called hanging a lantern on it, where you acknowledge just how absurd it is, to kind of let the audience know, no, we realize it's dumb too, but we're doing this for the story. We're doing it for a laugh or something like that. So that the audience goes, how could you be so stupid as to not realize this? They go, no, we did realize it. We just thought the story was better with it. And so you can kind of hang a lantern on it to acknowledge, yes, we know this is absurd. We know this shouldn't happen. It's going to happen. Trust us. And so Taylor was basically kind of hanging a lantern on a lot of the problems that the show is having, because it's a brand spanking new show. And they haven't figured out their specific genre. And again, they're doing something that was basically created by Chris Hardwick to basically show his friends off. Like, At Midnight was a project that Chris came up with to make himself look good and make his friends look good. Like, that was the entire purpose of At Midnight. And he didn't care if anyone watched it. It just so happened that because it was cheap and because he understood the format relatively well, it worked pretty well. But I think Chris Hardwick probably would have done At Midnight on YouTube to an audience of 4, because he just liked it and he thought it would have been fun. And so they're copying something that was never meant to be hosted by Taylor Tomlinson or have any of these comedians on it. And instead of going, okay, well, let's make this something that works for Taylor better, let's make it something that works better for these, they just copied a previous format that used to work, which is extremely common in television, and didn't update anything, didn't change anything for differing tastes or things like that. And it just came off really flat and bland and boring and very, very awkward, which is upsetting because, again, I love Taylor Tomlinson, and I think she's phenomenal. And I really want to see this show do well. I want more panel shows in the U.S. I think they're really, really funny. I actually went and I created and I did a test run of my own panel show that I was going to run on either YouTube or Twitch. And even got a bunch of friends of mine to be panelists on it, just to give a trial run. And overall, it went really, really well. The problem that came about was, again, scheduling is a nightmare. And I think shortly after that is when all the bad stuff with my mental health started getting really, really bad. I'm trying to remember who it was that I actually got to be on it. I don't remember. I know one person, I'm not going to name them, but they gave me a lot of feedback that would have helped the show if it had ever turned into anything. But no, I love panel shows. I think they're great. This is a badly created panel show created by a bunch of Americans that don't understand what panel shows are. And it's really sad because I think in this particular format, I think Taylor Tomlinson could really, really thrive. But they need to, instead of running like a dozen games in an hour-long show, they need to run 3, barely. And instead of everything just being one-liner points, give them time to interact. Because even when they did stuff, like, I'll bring up Mock the Week because it's the show that I've watched the most. It's the panel show that I've watched the most. In Mock the Week, they would have these things like, if this is the answer, what is the question? And so they would just give an answer like 112,000 turnips or something like that. And then the panelists would just have to go, is that, Is that what the final reparations are for the Irish potato famine? Ha 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 ha! And so people would make those little one-liner jokes. However, in between the one-liners, the comedians would interact with each other. And they would make jokes and things like that. And then eventually they would give the actual correct answer, and then they'd let the comedians talk about it some more. And that's what was funny. And that's what made it funny. And some comics don't do particularly well in that kind of format. I know in particular, I think it was Joe Brand, who's a UK comedian. Her particular comic style is extremely kind of acerbic. Which is great. I love acerbic comedians and the things like that, which is kind of a English comedy style. But panel shows in general, kind of, you have to be a bit aggressive. You have to kind of interject, and you have to kind of talk over other people a little bit to be able to be a part of the conversation. And they're primarily, it's mostly men on panel shows. And part of that is, again, aggression tends to be more of a masculine trait than a feminine trait, and competition in general tends to be more masculine than feminine. So it kind of makes sense that happens. But female comics in general were getting really, really upset that they weren't being focused on in panel shows anywhere near as much as men. And Joe Brand was becoming significantly more vocal about it. And she finally got to the point where she said, yeah, I won't do Mock the Week anymore. I hate having to talk over a bunch of men just to be heard. And to be fair, everybody on the panel show has to do that. That's how the panel show works. It's just her particular brand of comedy doesn't thrive in that kind of situation. And she as a person doesn't like having to be the one that forces herself into the conversation. She wants to have her turn and then somebody else have a turn, which again is perfectly fine. It's just not good for that format. And I think we can kind of see that with After Midnight. Because Taylor Tomlinson, again, every single joke looked like, because of the way it was cut, they would give Kurt one, and they would I don't remember names. What is it? They would give Kurt one, and they would get a Parna one, and then they give Whitney one, or maybe they'd start with Whitney this time. But everybody got a chance to tell a joke. And still, with the fact that they gave everybody a turn, they still had different points, and no one could figure out why. And it was because they edited it so that every comedian got a joke. And yeah, I think that was also one of the other reasons why a lot of the jokes kind of fell flat. Because if you watch Whose Line Is It Anyway, when they do things like Scenes from a Hat, which is basically At Midnight is Scenes from a Hat with some extra stuff. Like it's just an hour-long version of Scenes from a Hat. But your scenes can only be a single joke. You cannot actually create a scene. I guess it'd be better. They don't do it on the new version. They used to do it like once or twice on Drew Carey's version. They did it a lot in the UK one. They called it World's Worst, where everyone would stand on the world's worst step and you give me the world's worst example of blank. That's basically what adds After Midnight is. It's just an hour-long episode of World's Worst, which is not a bad thing. I love World's Worst. I love Scenes from a Hat. But they don't give the panelists, and if you watch Whose Line Is It Anyway, you will see certain scenes you won't see anything from one of the guests, one of the comedians on there, because they just didn't have an idea for that particular one. And so it does a lot of times seem very lopsided. You'll see a lot of Ryan and Colin and Wayne, and then depending on the guest, sometimes there will be entire scenes from the hat where the guest shows up maybe once or twice. And everything else is just Ryan, Colin, and Wayne, because they're very, very good at it, and they've been doing it for like 20 or 30 years at this point. So, yeah, but unfortunately for After Midnight, they wanted to give every single comedian the same amount of time, and what that turned into was jokes that didn't land got airtime because it was the only joke that particular person made. And yeah, like it's just, it's upsetting. I like the idea of After Midnight. I think it's a great idea for a show. I think At Midnight was a great idea for a show. And after a while, it got into a very decent groove, and I did enjoy most of it. But this first episode of After Midnight was not good. It did not make Taylor Tomlinson look good in any way, shape, or form. It did not make the comedians look particularly good. The person that won, spoiler alert, the person that won, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear who the person was that run after I finish talking about this point, I will go like this, and that's so you can know that you can unmute it. Okay, so spoiler alert, and I still can't remember their name. Aparna is the one that won. And the entire episode, she looked like she was about to shit herself. Like, she just looked terrified the entire time. Also, she barely was visible above her podium, because I'm assuming she's just a short person in general. But give her a apple box or something. Just because she's that short in real life doesn't mean that you can't make it so that people can see her. The difference between Kurt and Aparna was insane. And so I really wish they would have. And there is a part of the game where they actually get out from behind the podiums, and so at that point you would have no choice but to notice that she's significantly shorter than everyone else on the stage. But that is perfectly fine when there's not a podium blocking 90% of her body. So give her a damn apple box. But anyway, so she won, and I think she won simply because she happened to be the one that buzzed at the right time to get the most points. I don't think she was really that funny. Not that I don't think she's a funny comedian. I've actually never seen any of her comedy before. I'm assuming she's probably pretty good, because Whitney Cummings, I do know her comedy. She's hilarious, and she also is a writer. She wrote Two Broke Geeks. Or not Two Broke Geeks, Two Broke Girls. Two Broke Geeks is me and Omar, and they're amazing and wonderful. But they've never been on, well, I was going to say, they've never been on television. Mia's a writer now, and she does super, super well. And Omar is everything. He does everything with everybody, and only appears when you don't expect him. But Two Broke Girls ran for like 4 or 5 seasons, and it was Kat Dennings and Beth something with a B. And they played really, really well off each other. There were a lot of people that hated it. I was not one of them. I thought it was great. I thought Kat Dennings and Beth, what's her name, did really, really well. And it worked really well. Whitney also had her own show called Whitney that did not last anywhere near as long as Two Broke Girls. Because I just don't think the premise was nearly as funny. But yeah, no, Whitney Cummings is an incredibly talented comedian. I also don't know who Kurt was. I'd never seen him before. But he was decent. He wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. But yeah, Aparna, just, her jokes always felt like, they had like a member of her family held hostage, and so she always had this like, yes, here's a joke, you don't have to kill anyone. Please don't kill them. Please don't kill them. No, keep both of their ears on. Like, she just always had this expression like she was in some sort of hostage negotiation. And she looked terrified the entire time. And again, there are comics that is their persona, that they always look terrified on stage. And if you do it well, it can be really, really funny. This didn't feel like she wasn't playing into the fact that she was terrified. She was trying to look nonchalant, and she just didn't look it. And she somehow won, and I cannot tell you why. Despite the fact that the points were listed, it never made sense who really got the points. Which, again, since the points don't matter, it doesn't need to make sense. But when you make them do matter, then they no longer make sense, and then they do, but they don't. It's very confusing. So, yeah, I thought Whitney was probably the funniest person on stage, and she got kicked off. And then the other two people just felt awkward and like they didn't know what they were doing. And again, Whitney, as far as the aired footage, I don't know what was happening behind the scenes. It's possible that the other two were really, really funny and they just got left on the cutting room floor because their editors were idiots or something. But Whitney was the only person that actually tried to banter with the other comedians. And that's the point. And she got kicked off for it. So anyway, enough spoilers. No more spoilers. So anyway, overall, After Midnight is a great premise that thus far, in the only episode that exists, so understand, this is just their first episode. They really can't go anywhere but up. But as far as their first episode, it fell flat real bad. Now, if they, again, reduce the number of games they try to put in, let the comedians banter with each other and stop tracking the points, or even better, don't use numbers to track the points. Make up arbitrary things. You know, if they do an episode, one of the videos they did was this dude that was basically fucking a chicken. And when I say that, it was this dude that was it looked like he was trying to imitate Salt Bae. If you don't know what Salt Bae is, congratulations, you're a better person than I am. But it looked like he was trying to imitate Salt Bae, so he's this kind of like chiseled, Chad-looking kind of dude, and he has like bedroom eyes, and he's trying to kind of prep a turkey, or not a turkey, a chicken. So as he's prepping it, like he takes a knob of butter and puts it on his two middle fingers and then kind of puts it into the cavity of the chicken like this. And if you know, you know. And if you don't know, congratulations. You don't need to know. And then after he does this to put the butter in the chicken, which is the thing you do. If you want a good roast chicken, probably one of the best things you can do is you actually peel up the skin a little bit, and then you put like a knob of, technically what you want to do is you want to put some compound butter, which is butter that's mixed with a bunch of herbs and spices, so that as it melts, it kind of bastes the chicken. So that's a real thing you can do, but the way that he was doing it just... And then after he does this, he went... It was massively gross, because that's how you get salmonella. And one of the jokes they made was about salmonella. But what would have been a lot funnier, thank you, phone. What would have been a lot funnier than giving 100 points to you for a joke is you go, I'm going to give you a sexually suggestive knob of butter, and you are going to get 2 salmonella. Like giving them, like if you just list on the screen the random nonsense points that they get, yes, I think that's worth two drumsticks and a breast. You know, stuff like that would have been really funny, and then they can pick whoever they want to win. But no, they had to give them actual points, and it made no sense. And then again, if every single time they give out points, it's directly related to the thing that they are just watching, it's never going to look weird when you see the screen showing, why does he have 2 chicken legs and it looks like an implant? What the hell is that about? Like, that would be really, really funny. Or you, because of the kind of, because of the kind of internet culture based show that it is, you award them points in emotes. I'm like, I'm gonna give you a smiley face, a thumbs up, and Pac-Man getting an enema. That is, or no, Pac-Man getting a prostate exam. That is actually a reference to, I think, Taylor's first special. Go watch it. It's on Netflix. It's Taylor Tomlinson. I can't remember what it's called, but go watch all of her specials. They're brilliant. She has another one coming out, I think, next month. They're so good. But yeah, give them points entirely in emotes. And the emotes themselves are reset at the end of every round. You don't keep track of which emotes each person gets. You just randomly give them emotes. Because again, the points don't matter. And you can use that as another joke. As opposed to just going boom, points, and then you magically go from 800 points to 1200 points without telling a single joke. And no one can understand why. So yeah, overall, not thrilled with the first episode of After Midnight. I want it to be a good thing, but they need to change the format. And unfortunately, because of how Hollywood works, I sincerely doubt they're going to change the format. The thing with Hollywood is once they decide to do something, that's what they're doing. And if you don't like it, go fuck yourself, because we have decided this is what you are going to like. And you see that constantly. Like, there are so many places, like I think the Star Wars sequels were probably kind of the best example of that, because the first The Force Awakens was a shot for shot remake of A New Hope. Like it's they didn't even try to hide it. Like, they had so many of the exact same scenes over and over and over again. I mean, Obi-Wan gets killed in both of them, except Obi-Wan is Harrison Ford in the sequel. Like, it's really sickening. However, in The Force Awakens, Poe Dameron and Finn kind of had a thing going, and it was actually pretty good. Like, I really enjoyed the fact, like, it wasn't written, but it was just the fact that the actors played off each other really, really well. And there was kind of this, unspoken, romantic tension between the two of them, that in the second movie, 100%, they could have made them a couple. And I wouldn't have been upset about it. Like, a lot of what they did with The Last Jedi was so monumentally stupid. And I think a couple of the beats, like the romance between Finn and I think it was Tico, were put in there because Hollywood goes, no, they're not gay. We didn't make them gay. Well, look, they're so not gay that he's going to fall in love with this other girl. And that's what it is. And then when Rise of Skywalker came out, they just kind of double and tripled down on these really dumb decisions that they could have changed. But no, they're like, no, this is what we're doing, and you can't tell us what to do. You're not our real dad. And so my fear for After Midnight is, despite the fact that they have something that could be really, really good, they are so stuck on this stupid format that barely worked before, and it mostly worked because of Chris Hardwick and his friends kind of working around the really dumb format, that they're going to go, no. This is the format, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to just force people to like this format. It's the same thing as when Blizzard went, yeah, you guys say that you want Classic WoW, but you really don't. Trust us, we know what you want better than you do. That is the entirety of California right now, which is where everything is made, unfortunately. They're saying, they're like, the audience is wrong. We're going to tell you what you want. You don't get to tell us what you want. It is our job to tell you what it is that you want. And that's what my fear is for After Midnight. They've got a bad format, but a lot of good ideas. And my fear is they're going to cling to this bad format until it's canceled rather quickly, because I don't see this being a ratings grabber. And even if it is remarkably cheap to create, which it's not looking like it's going to be. Again, they spent a ton of money on the set and everything, the thing like that, and they have a live audience. And again, I guess it'll depend on what they're paying their panelists to be on there. But yeah, my fear is that they're going to run this into the ground because they don't understand panel shows, and they've decided on a format that is bad. If they can get us away from that format and allow the panelists to interact and tell jokes with each other, and even do a little bit of material. If you look at something like Mock the Week, they have an entire section where it's called like the Wheel of News or something like that. And all it is they spin a wheel that is digital and completely rigged, and a topic comes up, and one of the comics does like 3 minutes of material on that. And secret, the comics all know what's coming up, and they know which one is for them because they have pre-written material. Because again, the entire purpose of Mock the Week is for it to highlight comics. And so it does give them a chance to do actual material. Now, I'm not saying that they need to have a section like that for these comics so they can do actual material, but you do need to give them more than just, hey, we're going to show you random shit and hope that you're funny enough to come up with something in less than a couple seconds. And then we're going to give you points that don't matter but actually do, because we're going to kick one of you guys off for no reason. They need to change the format. They need to don't get rid of the games, but reduce the number of games in a particular episode, so that there's only like about 3 of them. If it's going to be an hour-long episode, do 3 or 4 games, and then a little bit of banter time in between. Like they tried to do that in this one, where they had a short conversation with each person that lasted less than a minute, and that was actually more entertaining. But again, they were so used to the format of I have to get a one-liner, that even that felt forced and stupid. So, yeah. Overall, I was depressed with After Midnight, but if the showrunners and writers can get their heads out of their ass, actually, if some of the writers could be fired because they were really, really bad at their job, and some of the showrunners could understand what a panel show is, I think they have something that could be really, really cool. And I'd love for Taylor Tomlinson to do super, super well. One of the jokes that they just kept hammering over and over, that she is the only female late night host, which is true on American television. The reason that it's true is every other late night female host has made it entirely about, I'm the only late night female host, or I'm the first late night female host, or I am the only person of color late night female host. And they always make it about, look at me, I'm a trailblazer, and not about, hey, look at how funny I am, or look at how good I am at interacting with guests. No, it's always about, look at how persecuted I am. You have to like me, or else you're racist or sexist or some other ist. And it's monumentally stupid, especially since Taylor Tomlinson does not need that. She is remarkably funny. She is doing sold-out tours. She has a 3rd Netflix special that has already been taped apparently, and is going to be premiering in, I think it's February. Like, everything that is happening with Taylor Tomlinson now is doing super, super well. She's earned every single second of it by working her ass off. She's doing great. You don't need to try and imply that she's somehow oppressed. She's not. I'm going to go out and say this right now. Taylor Tomlinson, you are not oppressed. You are doing exactly what you want, the way you want it, and you're getting praised for it. That is not oppression. So they need to get off this stupid thing of, you're the only female host, rah, 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 sexism. No, she got the job because she deserved it, not because she's a girl. And if she keeps the job, it'll not be because women aren't oppressed anymore, or are oppressed, and this is a way that we can fight the oppression. It'll be because she's actually good at her job. Let's do that. Because I think she is very, very good. She's very, very funny. She was just put in a real bad spot. And again, this is the first episode. It's going to take her time to get used to being in front of a crowd in this particular way. Because she's very used to being in front of a crowd with a microphone in her hand and being the only person on stage. She is not used to being the host of a fake game show that they're trying to turn into a real game show. So hopefully, I'm going to say probably the first week or 2 of shows are going to be rough. But if they can get past this idea of, hey, we're going to stick to this game show format like glue, and get to the idea of, this is about bringing comics on and letting them be funny, and just giving them some material to react to make them more funny, then I think it could be something really, really good. And it might be a career-defining thing for Taylor Tomlinson. We don't know. At Midnight was a career-defining thing for Chris Hardwick, and now nobody knows anything about him. He doesn't host anything that I'm aware of, other than he might still have a podcast that nobody listens to. He's not in any TV shows or movies. Certainly doesn't have his own TV show. He used to work for, he worked on G4. I think he was on Attack of the Show as one of their correspondents for a little bit. Nobody knows anything about him. Nerdist, the company that he started, is a festering pile of shit. Mostly because they sold it to Discovery Networks, and Discovery fucked it over just like Legendary, sorry. They sold it to Legendary, and Legendary fucked it over in the same way that they fucked over Geek and Sundry. And he's doing nothing now. So while, yes, At Midnight was kind of a career-defining thing for Chris Hardwick, it turned into nothing for him. And now most of the people that know Chris Hardwick are either from At Midnight or from the allegations made by Chloe Dykstra. And that's it. Nobody gives a shit about Celebrity Bowling or any of the stuff that Nerdist used to do, because Nerdist is worthless now. It's the same thing with Geek and Sundry. Like Felicia Day was massive when Geek and Sundry Lilla launched, and now, first of all, she's a mom, so she's kind of doing the mom thing, and my understanding, she's doing it remarkably well. Her kid, if I remember correctly, her kid's name is Calliope, and I don't think she's shown any pictures of Calliope. Because she's a good mother and is not exploiting her daughter. But now she mostly does Twitch streams. She does really, really well for Twitch streams and stuff like that. But I'm not really seeing her getting a whole lot of acting gigs. And I think part of that is her choice. Like, she just didn't like the acting world. That's why she started doing the Guild, and that's why she did Geek and Sundry, is because she hated how Hollywood worked. But yeah, I'd love to see this become something better. But to be perfectly honest, is this crash and burn? If this crashes and burns, I think Taylor's going to be perfectly fine. Because first of all, I believe she's significantly more talented than Chris Hardwick will ever be. And second of all, she had success before becoming the host, and she will have success after. Whereas Chris Hardwick, the only thing that he really had was he was friends with Will Wheaton, and Will Wheaton got real big on tabletop, and he used to do stuff for Geek and Sundry, or not Geek and Sundry, G4. And that was about it. So, he apparently used to do stand-up comedy, and he, at one point, I'm assuming he used to be pretty good at it. I don't know if he does it anymore, but he's definitely never had a special or anything like that, which is what a lot of comics aspire to now. And with the number of comics that have gotten specials that 100% should not have gotten specials, yeah, I would assume that Chris Hardwick could have done something better if he was still doing stand-up comedy. But anyway, that's my little rant about Chris Hardwick. Overall, I have high hopes for After Midnight, but I'm kind of expecting it to crash and burn, because it looks like the people that are running it are morons. So we will see. I'd love to be wrong. Anyway, that's gonna be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.